Hello, everybody. This is another emergency podcast of the Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's Rick here. And, Jack, I think we might get to this point where there's so much news. These just aren't emergencies. We're kind of like the boy who cried wolf here.
It's great. It's like an emergency every day.
I mean, this is just the podcast that we're doing now.
I gotta tell you, this is sound maybe bad, but it's awesome. Like what's going on. There's just such craziness. It's so over the top behavior, whether, with Sam Bankman Fried to what's going on in Twitter and now like trying to dig into Amazon, like 10,000 people. But is that really it? Something tells me, because like Meta did 13,000, right? They have way less, they have way less employees, and Amazon is 10. I got a feeling, I have nothing to prove it on, but there's probably more to the picture. Like, what do you see? Like, what are you hearing on Blind? What's your inside scoop? Because you know everything.
No, I certainly don't know everything, but what I do know is, this week started off on Monday with this bombshell report from the New York Times. Everyone woke up Monday morning to hear Amazon plans to lay off approximately 10,000 people. Now, to put that in context, Amazon has over 1.5 million, that's million, employees worldwide. And among kind of their corporate staff, their white collar professionals, their technologists, it's about 330,000 employees, right? So this 10,000 figure is coming from this smaller cohort, the office folks, the ones that aren't in the retail, that aren't working in the warehouse.
I
And
love,
it
by the way,
ends up
300,000 is smaller.
right. Well, so that's the thing. And in that context, to your point, 10,000 out of 330,000 people
Yeah.
is just about 3%. And so, I mean, Meta had fewer and they laid off, what was it, closer to 11%. Of course, Twitter laid off 3,500, and that was 50%. But 10,000, to your point, is not too large for Amazon's scale, and it seems very targeted. So, news about some of these layoffs being, the notice being given out to the affected employees, actually came in yesterday. So Tuesday afternoon, some folks, mostly within Alexa and the devices units, started to um, find out that they didn't have a job anymore.
Well, can I
And
can I interject for a sec?
yeah,
Uh, you know,
please.
as a PR professional and as a
Sure.
communications professional, why, like, how, just kind of give this inside scoop. Like, why is it that they'll leak it before, to the Times or whoever, where it kind of gets out until it's official? Like, doesn't that freak employees out, or is that their way of making it better to manage their expectations? Like, what's behind that?
I mean, I would love to be a fly in the wall in all of these different conversations, just from a PR perspective. My soul dies a little bit when I hear the word leak and it's my company or my client. This is actually one of the worst ways for employees to find out, right? This is very poor internal communications. Like, ideally, when there's a change in company policy, it really should come from your manager and your leadership. You know, your employees shouldn't be finding out about things in the news. They shouldn't be finding things. I love Blind. Obviously, I'm probably contractually obligated to say I love Blind, but they shouldn't be finding out on Blind, right? Obviously, Blind and the news are great resources, um, but it comes back to kind of this failing of company leadership in terms of over hiring and having to do these layoffs, but also how they're executing that internal communications, that respect, frankly, for your employees is a bit poor. So, in terms of where these leaks are coming from, there are some folks out there that are a little cynical,
Mhm.
and they might be pointing to the uh, stock price, how it's trading, and they might say, gosh, it could be, an employee internally going rogue and saying, people need to know I'm going to warn my colleagues that might be affected. That's one theory. The second theory is they're looking at the stock price and they're going to leak it out so that they can kind of stop this like bleeding of this like, the shares trading lower and lower. When this news comes out, the Times, or in Meta's case, it was the Journal. After those articles came out, um, the stock price actually, stopped falling. Right? It didn't.
It went up and it
Exactly.
popped.
In Meta's case, it went up, right? Because they were the crux of these stories is the companies were taking steps to cut costs and be diligent with their business. And so I don't know if it's the case with any of these recent instances, but I mean that's a theory that's out there that I've certainly seen online.
Because like in the past, when there were layoffs, exactly what you were mentioning, you're managing people first and not do it through the media where you'll have a family member saying, "Hey, Rick at Amazon, I hear you're getting laid off." And you're like, "Wait, what? How, like, where is this from?" And it's really bizarre. And it seems like even with Meta, they kind of a week before were signaling they're doing it, that they're going to lay off there as well. It's just, and then you see with Elon Musk, if like they just say something that is a little not complimentary towards him, he'll fire him in real time, in real time on Twitter, which I've never seen anything like that before. I don't think anyone has. It's so like, why is it that, not to get on a tangent, but why does tech almost like have a whole set of different rules than other sectors? It just seems just like so extra compared to other ways that, more, other industries handle these things.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say that it truly is unique to the industry, right? When you
Yeah.
think about seeing these large tech companies, whether they're public or pre-IPO, quote unquote, there's this kind of cult of the founder, right? There's a lot of um, deference and respect um, that we give to these CEOs, these founders. They have uh, double shares where these CEOs have 10 votes and you guys get, ordinary shareholders just get one vote, or in Snap's case, you get 0 votes, which is crazy. Um, you have Mark Zuckerberg, who's been in charge of Meta. It's the company that he started and founded. And he's been in charge for 8 years, and he's probably going to be. It's a generational business by now, and it's going to be him at the helm no matter what, right? And so we have these like larger than life personalities, and um, what I think tech is just recently starting to realize is when you've built yourself up for so long, you have a lot further to fall, right? You have Theranos, you have Sam Bankman-Fried. Uh, Theranos became a documentary. Like my mom
Mhm.
knows what Theranos is, right? There's a Hulu like
Yeah.
series, right? And it's largely because of this kind of, I want to say this like cult of personality that's very unique to tech. I don't think
Yeah.
in Wall Street everyone's gonna be like Jamie Dimon. I will die for you. I will do anything for
Not
you,
at
right?
all. I mean, he's like very well respected, considered
Of
like one of the
course.
best bankers, but he doesn't have that flash, that charisma where people like are going to either love him or hate him. It's just he, is what it is. You're right. The most flamboyant is the guy from Goldman Sachs, David Solomon, because he DJs on the side. Seriously,
Right.
like that's his cool thing. Like, I'm the cool dad. I'm the cool dad that I'm a CEO of Goldman, but I DJ on weekends. But that's as like outrageous as you get. You know what I mean? Otherwise, so buttoned up, so corporate,
Of
and a lot of
course.
other areas too. But speaking of CEOs, okay, I'm trying to figure this out. Think about this. So Jeff Bezos at the height, right?
Right.
At the top is like, you know what? I'm peacing out. I found this hot, younger woman. I'm gonna just chuck my wife of like how many years, say goodbye, and I'm gonna work out and get ripped and go on my yacht. And Andrew Jassy, yeah, you go. And then he hands it over to Andrew Jassy, and everything explodes. So imagine this poor guy. He's like, oh, I get to be the CEO now. This is great. I was waiting in the wings forever. Now the stock price craters, the world is going nuts, and now he has to handle it. So, like, that's what did you think he knew, Jeff Bezos, that this was happening and he didn't want to be around when this was going down? He wanted to leave on a high note and just leave it to everyone else to clean up the mess.
You know what? I couldn't say, right? I think there's certainly a role for every type of leader, right? And some leaders, they come in knowing that they're on cleanup duty, right?
Mhm,
I think a more or less recent example was, do you remember United Airlines, where they had that overbooking on a plane somewhere in the Midwest? And the airport security dragged a passenger off the plane because they wouldn't leave, right? They didn't have a seat, they were overbooked, and it was a PR disaster, rightfully so, right? It was a terrible event. And what happened was that CEO, um, resigned. Their head of PR resigned, lost their
mhm.
jobs. Makes sense. And so, when you're the CEO at United Airlines, after that, you're going to go on an apology tour, right? And you're going to go out of your way to really focus on the customer, right? And really focus on the product. And I imagine Andy Jassy probably coming into Amazon. He's the first quote unquote professional CEO that's not the founder. And he has to do the grown up things. Maybe he is doing a similar cleanup role of saying, hey, we grew too much, but I'm going to be, the MBA case study of how to write a huge, maybe even bloated ship. I'm going to be the guy that really, gets us focused. And maybe that's his legacy. Maybe
It
he
makes a lot of
knew eyes
sense.
wide open.
That's smart because, like, so Bezos did what he did, built it up, had a lot of fun. He was like a rock star CEO, and he probably saw the times changing and becoming harder and more challenging. So, you know what? This is a good time for me to walk out a winner. Take my chips off the table and let somebody else deal with like all the headaches. And then a guy like Jassy, maybe he's built to say, okay, this is what I'm good at. I'm the behind the scenes guy. I'm not flamboyant. I'm not divorcing my wife and finding someone younger. I'm just, well, maybe he is. I don't know. I don't know what he's doing, but like, I'm going to really just go get through this and make this work.
I mean, I also think, as we're hearing more and more about these layoffs at Amazon in particular in the last, I would say 24 hours or so, um, the information that we're hearing, how many teams are affected, really gives you a sense of how complex and how
Yeah.
large Amazon has grown, right? So some of the folks that were laid off came from a cloud gaming service, and I was like, wow, Amazon makes its own games. Um, Alexa, well, we all know the smart assistant. Then
Well,
there's the
they're
devices,
losing billions on that. I thought Alexa, I assumed Alexa was just making a lot, a fortune, but I guess not,
right?
right?
Well, what shocks me is, like I'm a more recent, personally, a more recent convert to the kind of these like smart home
Mhm.
gadgets. And it always made me wonder, like, how are you selling this speaker that is so smart and so connected for only like 20 bucks or 50 bucks? Like, is this like the $1.50 hot dog of Costco for Amazon,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And finally they said enough is enough. Like I can't subsidize, like how much does it cost to create those devices and that technology? It's obviously not cheap, right? And Amazon, as all our um blind users will know, um, has pretty significant total compensation packages. That their salaries are quite high. And so, 330,000 people all earning, mo- probably like all of them earning six figures or more.
Mhm.
Like, "Ooh, how are you selling me something, a speaker for $50?"
So what I think it all boils down to is this, Rick, is that for pretty much since the financial crisis, the interest rates were artificially low. So, places like Apple and Amazon and Microsoft and the big investment banks were able to get access to capital so cheap they could do this and they could run, and then, you could have, I guess, like an Alexis that's not really doing that well from a financial standpoint, but just from a brand is cool. But now it's almost like, okay, there's a change of guards in terms of Bezos leaving and Adjasian, where you have to say, now we can't do this anymore. We have to be lean, we have to be mean. And it's weird to say that for size of Amazon, but every company has to say, all right, we got to buckle down now. We can't F around. We have to really see, okay, we got to put, make sure our costs are down. And then, and I hate to say this to the people I'm blind, but they're going to kind of look probably at compensation and start saying, hey, do we really need to pay these people this much money, particularly when there's been 120,000 plus layoffs? I think you guys have a counter for that. So I'm not sure if that number is accurate, but like about 120,000 people in 2022 alone in
Right.
startups and tech are laid off. So I wonder, they're going to start thinking, wait a minute, if there's so many people on the market, maybe do we have to really pay these people? Do we have to give them free lunch, free dinner, free laundry? Do we have to pamper them so much? Do we have to have, kombucha on tap and matcha iced tea on tap? Or is it time to really, mommy and daddy are here and we're like, okay, that's it. You can't have the car. You got to do your homework. You got to, whatever. Is that I think the new world that we're all going to be in now?
You know, I'm not sure because before, tech and all the like yoga in the office and, you know, uh, kombucha on tap and like fantastic cafeterias, there were companies beforehand that had great perks too,
Mhm.
right? They were Wall Street companies, right? They were these like large companies
Oh
that
yeah. Go out
that,
to
that
eat,
they
wine
also
and
had a lot
dine.
of
Oh,
perks, right?
absolutely. Go out drinking every night. Absolutely.
Right. And so it's not necessarily, unique to tech
Right.
or certainly not a modern phenomenon. And so in that sense, I can't imagine those perks would go away. Companies still have to um, recruit and, you know, it- these perks are kind of like a cheat code for employer brand, right?
Mhm.
If you're not necessarily well known, you can at least tout all of these bells and whistles and get on the radar with some candidates and probably make a few hires. Um, but I would say I think the big change that's coming up really needs to be kind of this like mentality shift, right? This like vibe shift, so to speak, in terms of the tech industry of, you know, which of these companies that are out there that we haven't heard about that are doing these layoffs, right? These like zombie companies that are out there don't necessarily have this great business model or like cash flow coming in, but because of the recruiting game, they had to spend millions of dollars giving free lunch, even though they're a startup, right? Because they
Yeah.
had to compete against, I don't know, Google or Meta or whomever. Um, how many of those guys are just bleeding out?
That's a good point, right? I guess we'll start to see that where you start seeing probably downsizings from those firms because they're burning through their whatever round they're at and saying, hey, we can't keep doing this forever. Um,
I
but
mean, I read your article that you wrote for Forbes this morning about how all of these companies at the same time they're doing these layoffs, these tech companies, they're downsizing their real estate. And so
yeah,
this
isn't that
could be a
interesting?
boon, right?
I,
For the return to office. I mean, the remote work crowd.
See, I found that so interesting. So Salesforce, Meta, Lyft, others are basically jettisoning their real estate holdings. And I wrote a lot about it during the pandemic, where Google, Microsoft uh, were all either leasing, buying, doing different things with real estate, kind of hedging their bets because they weren't completely sure, is it going to be remote? Is it an office? So, and they were probably getting it on a discounted basis because, who was going to buy those big real chunks of real estate?
Right.
So they were buying in mass. They were building. Amazon was looking. Do you remember like Amazon was going to different cities and
Right.
hitting
Shopping.
each other off? And AOC was like gave them grief and then didn't build anything in Queens. And like there was a big thing here in New York City where people are like, what? We just lost thousands of jobs. So now they're probably saying, and I wonder if this is going to be a new trend, like, all right, if we downsize, sublease, the properties, get out of it, people work from home, will save a whole fortune on rent. Then also now you don't have all those freebies that you have to give because people are at home. So that it's a great way to save money. I wonder, do you think this is just a few companies doing it, but do you think eventually a lot are going to follow?
Look, I am so grateful when I saw your article this morning because you made sense of it because I cannot. I feel like I'm getting whiplash, right? Because
It is, because it is.
it was remote work was super great.
Mhm.
Employees love it. Employers are just going to have to get used to it, right? That was COVID. Then we had so many versions of, oh no, guys, you have to come back. We had these return to office, right? RTO became an acronym that so many of us are so used to. The goalposts kept changing, right? It was winter, then it was summer, then it was Labor Day, right? Now we're 2 years later. It's November, 2022, right before the holidays, and now we're going back to remote work. I,
Wild,
I'm
isn't
getting
it? It is
whiplash.
whiplash. It is. And I wonder, think about this. So in San Francisco, from what I understand,
Right.
lately, and I haven't been there in a long time, it's kind of dirty, a lot of crime, a
Sure.
lot of worry, right? So now, if let's say, Salesforce has a monster building there, there's other, large, organizations. So if they start leaving, then the ecosystem of bars, restaurants, nail salons, and retail stores, they're not going to be able to make a living because the workers who are the very well paid, tech professionals aren't going to be there. So now it's going to kind of be a downward spiral where the streets will be empty, which then brings in criminal element and dangerous element and all that. So then who's going to want to go back to work? So now even if you want to have another whiplash to get people back in, they're going to be like, well, no way, because there's no place to go to eat. It's kind of dangerous. There's, drug paraphernalia on the streets and so forth.
Right.
So once this goes, I wonder in places like San Francisco, can you ever even get it back? Then that'll be it. It'll just be like remote and that's it. And then maybe if you still own the space or you're still leasing it for 10 years, all right, you got to suck it up and maybe try to get people in there. I think I remember you telling me where, and it was on Blind, where in Oakland, where it was Credit Karma or is that Credit Karma,
Right.
where, there's gunshots and people are like, I'm afraid. I, I, I don't want to literally risk my life going to work. It's not worth it. So, this is a big issue for people. I think so. I think for the work from home people, the remote people, this could be a huge victory. This could be a huge victory where it looks like it might change back again to like companies saying, hey, we got to tighten the belts, we got to cut costs. And we've been laying off people. And think about it. How dumb is that? Instead of laying off people, keep people and lay off the real estate, right? Let's go lay that off. Seriously, let go the expensive real estate and keep the people. Because the people are driving it. The real estate isn't driving. The real estate is not writing code, right? The real
No.
estate isn't selling, to clients. It's the people. So maybe this is the smart move. You know what I mean? To say, hey, let's keep the people. Let's even bring back the people, get rid of the real estate footprint and use that extra money for the people. And that'll be our competitive edge.
I mean, I think you hit the nail right on the head on 2 points, right? Like, one is on this podcast, we've heard directly from people that are facilitating this kind of age of remote work, right? We had Deal that's doing it
Yeah.
abroad, Angel is Talent that's doing it, all over. And this is kind of the new economy, right? Where we kind of seen it. It has worked. It can be more cost effective. But I think what's really interesting is the second point is, to your point, we're already seeing it in San Francisco.
Yeah.
We don't have to wait to see that future. Uh, Recently, the mayor of San Francisco um, had a partnership with Uber and some other large tech companies, and she was basically begging tech companies to return to the office because small businesses
Yes.
downtown were getting slaughtered,
That happened
right?
in New York City too. Same
Wow.
thing. The mayor put on this charm offensive, places like, Jamie Dimon, which you talked about, the CEO of
Right.
JP Morgan. Yeah, they were saying, hey, we got to do this because it's a death spiral, basically. It's a death spiral for the ecosystem there.
I mean, what is insane is even before, so in 2021, when things did start to open up in San Francisco, if you went downtown, a lot of these hotels, a lot of these big storefronts on our main drag Market Street, these Starbucks, these small like restaurants and delis, they were still boarded up, literally with plywood over their windows, like they were preparing for an incoming hurricane. Like,
Jeez.
they were not coming back. And that is probably the most prestigious street in one of the most expensive cities in the world. Starbucks, some of these grand hotels, 4-star, 5-star, famous name brand hotels, had their doors shut, windows covered. They were not coming back. Um, and so even if you were returning to the office and you did have to go downtown, gosh, can you imagine seeing that every single day?
It's
Like
not
you're
inviting. It's
almost
depressing, right?
right. And so, your employees are going to start complaining and saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't even find somewhere to eat lunch if I wanted to." Um, you know, Chains were closed up. Chains. Like, wow, like
Here's a wild card. Do you think, because I saw this happen with Wall Street, Wall Street was always seen as Wall Street, where all the investment banks, brokerage firms, trading firms. But then Wall Street itself, it's kind of, now it's an ephemeral name. It could be Wall Street, meaning you could work anywhere in finance,
sure.
but the actual area, they started making them apartments. So they would take the buildings that
Oh,
used to be brokerage firms, because they started moving from New York to Jersey City, then across the country to around the world. So now you go down Wall Street and you see the New York Stock Exchange, and you see a family with a stroller walking their dogs.
really?
Yeah. So I wonder, maybe that's what could happen. So it's not all bad. So, like, I mean, we would be, talking very negative in a way, that it could be this
Sure.
downward spiral. But let's say if you retrofit these big office buildings and make it, and think about it, how hard is it for people to find affordable housing? So let's say you could take these big buildings, let's say the Salesforce building, ginormous place, right? And all of a sudden you retrofit it to apartments that are affordable, and have it mixed use, where you could have restaurants in the building, you have gyms in the buildings, what have you.
Yeah.
That could bring back and revitalize cities. So, just to, it's like, one, talk about whiplash before. This is a positive whiplash, that maybe for people who can't, have to commute in to San Francisco, and it takes forever, it takes a lot of money, it's not good for the environment. But if you can get an affordable apartment, all of a sudden, then the restaurants start opening again, the nail salons start opening again, and the retail stores. So that could be a positive thing that happens.
I think I'm not too familiar with Seattle and its local politics, but I wonder, with this, Amazon had such a great presence in Seattle, still does, right? It's the hometown. You love them or you hate them. Uh, that there's always concerns that is Seattle just a company town for Amazon, but you go downtown and they have exactly these kind of things, right? Like
Yeah.
you have offices, like Amazon just owns all these offices across every street block, but there's also in between them restaurants, apartment, condo buildings. And so I wonder, with Amazon's 10,000 layoffs on the corporate side, I suspect a lot of them are in Seattle. Perhaps that will be kind of maybe a first sign in terms of whether this new trend might happen. Will Amazon start to get rid of some of their offices, and in their stead, will they have these more live workplaces pop up. You know, does the city, do the people of Seattle take back downtown from Amazon a little bit? And is the result a nicer downtown or a nicer city to live in? Gosh, like that'd be so interesting, right?
I can't remember whether it's Microsoft or it's Amazon or where what they were trying to do is like build their own city, exactly what you're mentioning. So it
Oh,
becomes this mixed use place where you have parks, dog runs, places to bike, um, restaurants, but then also businesses. So you create this environment. Like, I don't know if you've ever went to Reston, Virginia. They had that. It's like they just
oh,
built this like
really?
little mini kind of city where you have all this, where it's almost it's easy to travel. You don't even need your car. You can get around restaurants, bars, clubs, hotels, all those things, and you have this whole kind of mini city ish place.
Do you remember Zappos.com, Jack?
Mhm.
So
Yes.
Zappos before Amazon bought it, and maybe I believe after Amazon bought it, but their founder and CEO, the late William Shea, I believe his name is, um, he was basically playing Sim City, doing exactly that in downtown Las
Mhm.
Vegas. You know, I believe he was a native
Right,
there,
right.
and he was so invested in that community. You know, he spent a lot of time, effort, I'm sure money, really focused on like how do we build this area so it's a nice place to go. You know, everyone just goes to Las Vegas and they go to all the resorts on the strip and they gamble and they go back to the airport and go back to where they came from. And he's like, no, I want to make sure like Las Vegas is a nice place to live. And you know, he was basically playing mayor downtown.
Yeah, I think that's the thing because this I might be getting his name wrong. I want to say Mark Laurie, who's like a big executive at Walmart. I think he had jet.com or something. They bought it out, and then he was at
Wow.
Walmart and big shot billionaire. I forgot what basketball team he was going to buy. And he's building a city like that from scratch to kind of put
Wow.
together, make an eco city that's environmentally friendly, no cars, walk everywhere, and do this. So these are the things that happen. So like what's so interesting to me is that something happens, right? And you're like, oh, this is terrible. It's the end of the world. But then you're like, huh, maybe not. Because now, like somebody like Tony Hsieh will say, no, wait, let's revitalize, this area around Las Vegas. Let's, this guy Mark Lurie, let's build, like a sustainable, town that's eco-friendly and all that kind of stuff. So, it's like one door opens, another door closes, and what happens, you have smart business people and entrepreneurs who say, you know what? Same thing they say with recessions, like all these great companies sprung out of recessions, So like, so let's say some of the people who are impacted by Amazon, or maybe elect, and this is what maybe you could kind of shed some light on, because it also seems people are given a packet or given a choice to have a package. They may say, you know what, I still have a lot of money saved up for my, RSUs and my options, and maybe with a couple buddies, we'll do our own startup. So like, are you seeing in addition to the 10,000, like, is there like other numbers behind the scenes that they don't broadcast because they don't want to they don't want to freak people out? Because if you hear really big numbers, it'll freak, what I mean? Freak people out. Like say 10,000 out of like 300 plus thousand. Okay. 3% ish. Okay. But you know, we can't
Yeah.
confirm or deny this, but like, do you think there's like some other ways that people are kind of shown the door, but they won't make the news and they do it kind of stealthily?
Right. I mean, 10,000 on its face is a sounds like a large number, and it is,
Yes.
right? It's five figures. That's a lot of people's livelihoods and
Right.
families effective, certainly. Uh, but when you do the math, right, 3% of the corporate headcount. Um, what's really interesting is I don't know if you know this, Jack, but Amazon within the tech community, they are known for um, having creative HR policies, we could say.
Mhm.
So one of the um, kind of common topics is Amazon's approach to employee performance reviews. And
The
so,
dreaded pips, right?
The dreaded PIPs, performance
It's
improvement plans.
why does it have such a cute name for a horrible thing?
You, you
Pip
have to
Pip
ask one
sounds
of
so innocuous, right? Pip
these
sounds
HR
nice.
and chief people officers that we have on. These acronyms that
Right,
probably come from some like legalistic
right.
framework. Um, but so Amazon, they basically have unwritten policy that they want to manage out about 6% of kind of what they deem as folks that need improvement, or kind of ones that aren't performing to the high standard that Amazon has in its company's leadership principles. They call them their company values. Um, and so
I love how they go company
6%,
values, but use that as an excuse to get rid of them. Right? It's like,
right?
how family values. Sorry, you're out of the family.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing, right? Where 6% is quite literally
Now,
double. And
now
that's
that's it. So
the
that's that now the numbers are getting good. So if you have the 3% for the 10,000 and then
you
another,
have the 6%, which is would be 20,000,
so now you have 30,000 people we're talking about. Then now that's a little scary number, right?
right? And they call it, and so here's another HR term for you. They allegedly call this, target the unregretted attrition, right? So that HR term where
Another
um,
lovely turn,
you
unregret.
you know they're not too upset if you know leave. And what's insane is it's basically if you are exited out, you're considered unregretted attrition. And this is not just at Amazon, but this is kind of a most, if not all, companies that have HR policies. This is kind of a standard thing is, you know, if you are determined to have left for unregretted attrition, or it's classified that way, you're not eligible for rehire, right? It's because
So you
it's
can't be like a boomerang because that's another trend that happened. A
it's
boomerang gets like,
unregretted, right? And so it's
wow.
because you might have did something wrong, violated a company policy. It's kind of like a dishonorable discharge, right? In the HR world, and it's not just Amazon that does this, right?
No, is it because you
Um,
did something wrong or just you just did not up to standards?
so I mean, in terms of like HR policies, like universally, like outside of Amazon, unregretted attrition, to my understanding, is it's usually used in those kind of situations, like you clearly did something wrong. It's like the dishonorable discharge
Is
of
it
of
terrible? You're
working
just
life.
like,
I
or
mean,
it
it
runs the
doesn't
gamut,
necessarily have to be horrendous, right?
right?
You're just not eligible for rehire, quite simply.
Right.
But at Amazon, it's the kind of quote unquote low ranked office workers, right? It is the people that have been identified to be coached out, essentially, or, put on these performance improvement plans. I mean, it's very similar to this practice of stack ranking, right? Where you have your
Which
team,
supposedly they don't do this, but they
which,
have to
which
have
they
to.
say they don't do, but they supposedly have this like 6% target. Supposedly, a group has to be unregretted, where you're not eligible for rehire. But with this stack ranking, let's say, hey, Jack, you and I were on a team. Let's say there's a third person just to round it out. And, Jack, you're doing great. So you're top performing on the team. Joe Schmo, our second guy, he's doing, he's meeting expectations. And Rick, you're doing okay, but you're not doing as good as Joe Schmo. So I'm actually number 3 in this team.
Uh-oh.
And, I would then be identified potentially, under a stack ranking system uh, for needing support. And so that I might be put on a performance improvement plan, or I might get, my manager might feel the need to like, micromanage me a bit more, right? Um, and I don't know if Amazon does or doesn't do this. I haven't worked there, but from the discussions on Blind, there's this concern or this dislike for this kind of stack ranking because it might be unfair, right? This team, you and I, and our friend Joe Schmo, like we might just be excellent, top tier, to just killing it, right? Just because I'm not as great as you or or Joe Schmo, then it's bad luck for me.
So in other words, they're not comparing, myself to the job description, what I'm supposed to do. They're actually benchmarking me against you and Joe Schmo. And if I don't stack up to, you and Joe Schmo, they're going to say, Jack, you have to go on a PIP. And then once you get on a PIP, is that the death knell, or can you still make your way back? Or once you're on it, it's like everyone looks at you and shakes their head and goes, sorry, dude, I'm so sorry, you're gone. Like, is there salvage? Can you salvage it or no once you're on that treadmill?
So according to reports online from
Mhm.
current and former Amazon employees, again, Amazon says they do not stack rank, but uh, Amazon, the saying goes, attempts to systematically identify it's about 6% of its office employees that need extra help, right? And some of them are funneled for extra coaching, and some of them are funneled through performance improvement plans. And the company, according to these posts online, expect more than one third of people on those performance improvement plans to fail,
Wow.
right? And so if you fail that performance improvement plan, um, it's unregretted attrition, right? Because you didn't meet the performance standards, right? Whereas, hey, Jack, like if you left, you were a top performer, and you just resigned because you got a greater job elsewhere. Perhaps Amazon would be upset that you left, and that would be the regretted attrition, right? And then you're eligible for rehire. In fact, they would love for you to come back as a boomerang employee. So that's kind of that difference there between quote unquote unregretted attrition and regretted attrition.
So would there be different buckets where you have that 10,000 layoff and then for whatever reason, you were targeted? And let's take that for a second. Do you think there's a reason why those particular people are targeted, or it's just like comes from the top down to like, okay, Jack, your division, you have to let go 5%. You choose who you're going to do it, but we have to do it. Do you have any thoughts like how that works?
I mean, it's hard to say because it's
Yeah,
it's very context specific and certainly company culture specific.
right.
But I've been in conversations at different startups and companies that I've worked at where we've had to do layoffs, and how I've seen them done is it's typically not something blanket like let's just cut all the low
Mm.
performers and that's how we'll get to the 10% number or something, right? It's typically something like this business unit or this product or this kind of in tech they like to say big bet, this big bet isn't working out, and so we want to stop the bleeding. And so they actually end up being fairly targeted. And so you might see like a marquee number like 10%, but some teams might have 50, 60, 70% of the entire team in some cases uh, cut because it's no longer a priority. And so they can be targeted. And, if you're an employee or if you're an outsider looking in, that feeling is a bit frustrating, right? Because um, you didn't decide that business strategy in most cases, and it can seem a bit random or unfair if you're a high performer and you just happen to be on a you know experimental team or a team that doesn't have as much margin or revenue as another team.
Now, this might be a naive question, but let's say whether it's Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, wherever, if let's say you find yourself, and hopefully this will be helpful to whoever watches and listens, to the podcast. So you're in this division and you kind of recognize, it might not be going anywhere. Let's say you're at Meta and you're building the metaverse. And even though your CEO and founder, Mark Zuckerberg, is all in, you're thinking, hey, we're hemorrhaging billions. I don't know if this is going to work. Are you better off kind of saying, hey, if there's a layoff, I might be targeted because my division really isn't hitting the numbers, and it's no one's fault. It's just like you said, it's like hemorrhaging, money. It's not going well. It's they had the high hopes for it. Would you be better off, like for like right now, for like any company, not even a tech company, just like any person who's working anywhere, just to kind of do this evaluation and say, hey, the group I'm in, is it doing well or not doing well? What's the financial situation for my particular unit? And if it's not doing well, but I really don't want to quit and go and look around for someone else, to try to pivot internally and find what's hot, and maybe try to find some mentor, somebody who could be a rabbi to get you into that space. Is that possible, you think? Is that kind of an interesting maneuver that people could take away from this, so that, hey, because you're absolutely right. Like, I didn't think about it, but it's so logical when you mention it. Yeah, you're going to go to the groups that aren't performing well, they aren't hitting their numbers, or they just not like work like they thought, or it's going to take way too long. And right now they got to cut the bleeding. So, like, before you get to that spot, then you're going to be targeted, or have a bigger chance to have a target on your back to kind of pivot out. Is that viable? Is that something, maybe a good piece of career advice?
I mean, it could be, right? So
Yeah,
if you think, and I think this is universal across industries. It's not specific
yeah,
to big tech or tech at large or startups even. But, for example, right now rates are quite high. Few people are refinancing their mortgages, especially if you locked them in a few years ago, and you're paying two, three, heck, even 4%, right? Like now they're close to six, seven, whatever, if you want to buy a house, right? And so not many people are refinancing.
right.
And so you've seen a lot of these banks, these home lenders, um, they're cutting staff, and they're cutting these like loan officers and underwriters and these
Slashing them.
whatever. And it's primarily on the refinance side, right? Because there are some people still out there buying homes. So you still need loan officers. So it'd be foolish to cut everyone. Uh, but for the folks that specialize in refinance, not so much in 2022, right? With rates high and expected to get higher. Um, with Amazon, they've been cutting devices, right? So it's Kindle, it's good books, it's Alexa. And so you'll notice like we're right before Black Friday and Amazon, everyone knows them as a retailer. You know,
Yeah.
Whole Foods wasn't affected, I don't think. Amazon retail wasn't affected. Now there's a chance that, they could be affected right after Black Friday or Christmas, but like they're quite targeted, and they're very, adjacent bits, right? So like Amazon Alexa, Kindle,
Yeah.
good books, Fire, like,
Well, now
the
you're freaking me
phone.
out. Like, why are they, like,
I'm
is
sorry,
this a
Jake.
sign of like this, like we're going to hit into a recession, that people aren't going to buy these devices, and that's why they're
I mean,
cutting? Is that a harbinger of what's to come?
Amazon would probably say, well, it's not that they're not going to buy in the future, but that they haven't, like, people haven't bought these devices in the past, right? Right. And I don't know if it's because of waning demand, consumer uncertainty about the recession. Everyone that has one already has one.
Right.
But I think one thing that's really interesting is, speaking of our man Jeff Bezos, recently he warned Americans, oh, don't spend so much money.
Well,
There could
like,
be a
that was
recession coming.
bizarre. Like, what do
Right? Do
you
you
like?
remember that?
Yeah, you know, it's what's so interesting. He said that at the same time about where, like, the layoffs were coming, and then, but I'm going to give my money away to charity. Like, he
Right.
kind of put it all together, all those things. Don't buy, don't buy anything, but I'm gonna give all my money away. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't
Okay.
that funny? So it's like it first came, I'm a billionaire, and there's a recession coming. Like, be a little bit more thrifty. Um, then the company that I founded, granted, he doesn't have day-to-day management, is laying off to be thrifty and save money because of this, uncertain macroeconomic environment. Um, And then the third part is, oh, but I'm also, I'm not a bad guy after all. I'm gonna give my money away.
Yeah, I'm a good guy. I'm giving my money away. Me and Sam Bankman-Fried, we're giving our money away. We're
It's
altruistic.
it's it's so odd. I mean, my PR hat, I would say like, well, that's bad timing. You could have done the messaging a bit better, right? Uh,
Or if I wouldn't you say buy Alexa, buy Kindle? Come on, let's go. You know, keep the economy going. So it's yeah, it's real. It's yeah, that's kind of odd. And just to dial back for a second, just so I understand.
please.
So you have the 10,000 who you said, okay, you're doing, and they're looking for people who are in those groups that really are not performing. Not that the people aren't performing necessarily, it's
It's
just
the
that
unit,
unfortunately they're in
right?
the unit, and that sucks. Then you have the unregretted attrition, which now is that with the PIP, or those could be broken out separately where you have
No, it's related,
so the
right?
two are kind of together. So you could have that 10,000, but you may have another 20,000 perhaps that
Like going through
between
that
going through the
process.
PIPs, going through the be kind of showing, I mean, it's being known. And people like people who are watching this, they've been in business, in the corporate world for a while. They kind of know sort of, even if they don't want to feel they know it, where their boss is like, I'm kind of done with you. And it's
Yeah.
so this is a weird thing. So that you're knowing you're going to kind of be next. So are there other ways that they kind of clean house, but doesn't show up in in the news as like a layoff?
Yes. I mean, with any company, there's always this natural, using our parlance of HR terms,
Right.
regretted attrition, people
Mhm.
that just leave for better opportunities or because, something personal, right? Like you might just have to move to Florida
Right.
and you're in New York or California or something, right? Um, and then alternatively, there are these severance packages that are being offered among Amazon employees. These kind of quote unquote voluntary layoffs that you could take. And so I think that is another category that I think uh, people aren't paying much attention to, right? Because the worst thing about this is, no company, no PR, no finance, no HR team is going to say, hey, I offered a voluntary buyout package, a severance package, and you know, hundreds or thousands of employees took me up on that offer, right? You know, it might just get aggregated for these public companies in, an earnings report, and that says, oh, this quarter we have an extra charge uh, because of personnel costs,
Yeah,
right?
how does that work, Rick? Does somebody say, like, let's say I'm at ABC Widget Tech Company, or um, and I would go to my boss or HR and say, "Hey, I know there's layoffs. I'm in a position where maybe I was thinking of relocating anyway, so I'll take a I'll be glad to take a package and save somebody, who has young kids and they're being bad straight. I'll take the bullet." Is that kind of what happens and you go there, or do they approach you and say, "Hey, Jack, would you be interested in getting a package, giving the hint that if I don't take the bait, I might go on a PIP and I might lose my job." So I'll say, okay, I'll take the package. Yes. Is that, how does this work?
I mean, I've seen it in so many ways, right?
Yeah.
It's the worst answer to give, but it's so contextually specific, right? Like we saw at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, because of these restrictions and borders
Mhm.
closing, travel came to a halt, right? And so what happened was all these airlines, sure they got their payroll bailout from the government of the US, but
Right. Like the
um,
PPP stuff. Yeah.
right. But a lot of these airlines, they were doing voluntary buyouts and they're being quite public about it, right? And saying, hey, pilots, you're not going to be flying for the next few months. Some of you are older. Would you take this kind of quote unquote early retirement or this buyout, right? So sometimes it's very public and they do report the numbers and, they're Companies are very open about it. In other cases, yeah, like, I've been at companies where people come to me and say like, "Hey, can I we see this on Blind too. Can I save my job? I'm doing maybe a bit better in financially, or, maybe I'm more confident in my ability to get another job." But someone that's on a work visa who relies on their work status to be able to, stay in this country legally, like that's a stressful event, these
Yeah.
layoffs, right? And so, we've seen some people saying like, I would like to volunteer, right? And sometimes companies will take them up on it, and sometimes they won't, right? Like from a company's perspective, maybe it's the cynic in me, but like,
Mhm.
why would they pay someone a severance package if you just revealed to yourself that you were going to leave anyway, right? So there's some like gamesmanship. I'm sure
Huh.
that's out there. I hope it's rare. I can't say for sure, but I think to answer your original question, it certainly runs the gamut. I mean, in this case, Amazon, according to posts on Blind, say um, that they're opening up some kind of raise your hand, so to speak. What's really interesting is um, you mentioned this earlier. Elon Musk, this sends out a email at midnight saying we're going to go hardcore. If you're in, you're in. Sign this button or click this button, right?
Right.
Click yes. Uh, but the inverse of that, what wasn't said is, well, if you don't click that button, you're saying no, you're opting out. And so what does that mean? That's basically like a severance, right? You're saying I
Yeah.
don't want to continue. I assume you would get a payout then too, right? A buyout, some severance if you're, you know, quote unquote not in for Elon's Twitter or Twitter 2.0 or hardcore mode.
So this also is another kind of thing for people to kind of think about. It's kind of a tough decision because let's say I'm going. Well, take a step back. I'm going from the frame of
Sure.
reference that we're going to be in this kind of space for the next year or two, easy, in terms of still trying to bring down inflation, high interest rates, belt tightening, the economy contracting a bit. So you're going to see a lot of layoffs. Some may be large, some not so much. Now, are you are you better off? Maybe sometimes if you feel like, hey, I'm on, let's say you're Twitter, right? And you're feeling this is a sinking ship. And I'm not saying Twitter is a sinking ship or not, but just for the sake of conversation,
Right.
would it make sense for someone to say, you know what, I could stay here, but every day I'm going to be scared I'm going to lose my job? And for some people, that for their mental health, it's just not good. Every day to worry, is this my last day at work? And I've seen people like that, and it just wrecks them because you can't, that's too much anxiety and stress to worry coming in. Is this my last day? Would they be better off? Or is it too risky to raise your hand and say to the HR person, and maybe spin it in a more positive way? Like you said, hey, I see there's a lot of people on visas here. I'm an empathetic person. I'm fortunate that I put away some money. Maybe my kids are older, so I don't have to worry about them. And I take a package, which this way you get a severance package, you get a certain amount of money, maybe they do something for your options. And this way it buys you some time, maybe gives you 3, 6, 9 months, a year to find another job, wait out this market, and you don't have to live in fear every day. Do you think, I mean, I don't know, is that too risky to do? Or is that something maybe some people, if you're just so stressed, so anxiety ridden, so like, I can't take it every day. Like, every day I'm worried, is it going to be another layoff? I'll just end the torture now, and I'll leave, and I'll take money, and I'll go somewhere else. Is that, I mean, do you think that's something to recommend or not recommend? I mean, obviously it's going to depend on the individual.
Right. I mean, it certainly is a privilege, right? For
Yeah.
folks that, are on a visa that relies on their work authorization, surely they can't make this decision, right? Folks that, might have a family and like a large mortgage payment or something,
Yeah.
right? Like that changes the calculus,
Yeah.
right? But the thing is, and what I think people don't realize is companies are in the same position here too, is we don't know how bad it's going to be. Will it be 1 year? Will it be two
Right.
year? Jack and I are, are we going to be talking to each other in January and actually things have turned around? W No one knows,
See,
right?
it's
And
so hard because, like, just not to go off, script here or just
please,
go on a
yeah.
tangent, is that, what, just the other day, what was yesterday? I'm losing track of time with all, like, we're hit with so much information lately, where it seemed like Biden was saying, and I could completely wrong who's saying what, that, that Russia lobbed a missile that killed two people in Poland.
Poland.
And then you hear starting, like the media class chattering about, like, hey, that means NATO has to get involved because, Poland is part of NATO and we have to do something. And I'm thinking, holy crap. But, like, you're
World War
talking
Three.
about World War III with nuclear weapons. Like, it's just like this. No, this is nuts. This is crazy. So yeah, we live in a very volatile time period, really volatile. So it's so hard to make long-term decisions where it could have easily went something different, where all of a sudden it's like, you know what? They did this purposely. Now we're going to war. And all of a sudden, holy crap, we're at war, with Russia in World War III. So it's hard to make these decisions, right? It's hard to make long-term decisions when there's like a lot of uncertainty.
I mean, it's I think what we're also seeing is, even if you are, so to speak, safe, even if
Mhm.
your company does have a layoff and maybe it's even quite large, there's no guarantee that your company won't do another round of layoffs, right?
I
Earlier
think
this
this is going to
year,
happen. What do you think? Do you think that, like, you announce it now, but it might be a slow drip where if things, let's say, don't improve, then maybe a few months later, 5,000 here, 1,000 there, 2,000 somewhere else.
like what I think has been really crazy is the Twitter layoffs kind of normalized large figures, right?
Mhm.
When Twitter came out with 3,500, 50% of the staff, um, there were news reports earlier, so-called leaks, that Twitter might be getting rid of 75% of staff, right? And so to go from 75 to 50, what it ended up being, they were like, oh, that's bad. It's a lot, but maybe it could have been worse. And then what happened next was Meta with 11,000. They broke the five-figure
Right.
mark, right? And now we're talking about Amazon and saying, we started off this podcast. Oh, well, 10,000 is
Yeah.
actually not that bad. And you look at the, we're justifying
Yeah.
for them. Uh, and so it's insane to see how quickly that shift has happened
Yeah.
with our perception, right? And we're folks that are in it. You're recruiting on the front lines. You're an HR career expert. I'm on Blind where we're seeing this in real time, and we're taken aback. And so I wonder, I mean, earlier this year, we had Robinhood do 2 rounds of layoffs. We had Better.com that I believe they were up to 6 rounds of layoffs in the last 12 months. Better.com, 6 rounds, right?
Wow.
Hundreds of employees each time. And, what's really interesting is in
And wait, can I
a,
just interrupt you? So what, when they say Elon was bad, like, at least Elon didn't call his employees bad dolphins.
yeah, on Blind, right?
Which Garrett, what's the guy's name? Garrett, that's like,
Yeah.
or just got, let him go through a one-way video. So it's pretty cold with how
I
some
mean,
places do lay off people.
right. And so you had Robinhood do 2 rounds of layoffs. Um, and that's why there's some prominent venture capitalists out there. I believe Bill Gurley is one that comes to mind. And he, uh, you know, was the early investor in like Uber, Poshmark, very, very smart guy. And he always gives the advice to, know, uh, company boards and executives that, like, look, like when you do a layoff, there's a lot of reputational, morale, PR, HR damage that you're doing. And so, if you do have to do a layoff, do it once, do it deep. Don't do another round, right? And so, maybe we might look back and say, gosh, 10% is maybe too low. Maybe they should have gotten deeper, right? Because to his
Yeah.
point, Bill, he would say, look, you need to like protect the company. You need to make sure you can survive, save cash. You can always hire people later, right? You can always hire. Um, but you don't want to keep cutting, cutting, because you're not actually doing anything to save your business. And um, each time you're taking that PR hit, each time you're taking that morale hit, each time you're taking that productivity hit, right? Because also planning layoffs and doing everything costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of time, right?
You're so right.
Think
And
about all
then,
the lost productivity. Like I'm worried of like I'm gonna get laid off.
right,
Your
how can you
employees are
focus? How can you
right.
focus when you're just waiting?
They're
It's like you're in
very
jail
expensive.
and you're in death row and you're just waiting for them one day to call you and say, now's your day. And every day you're waiting for that person to call you. It's torture. It's almost like literally torture every day, worrying, is my number up? And how can you perform that way? How can you perform your best? And then you're scared to do anything because then you figure, maybe if I just do something and I make a mistake, then I'm out of here anyway. So then you can double check yourself, triple check yourself, and that's not a way to live. That's horrible.
No, it's terrible. And it's what's worst is it's just bad all around. Right? They're truly no winners. Right? The employer that's doing the laying off loses, right? They have to say goodbye to talent. They have to take that productivity hit that, of course I mentioned the product, the the HR, the reputation, the morale, the employer brand hits.
Well,
And so I
one
think,
thing, I'm sorry, good.
oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, so for the people to give some positive news,
Positive advice.
some positive, what I would suggest is this: given the framework that Rick was outlining, and I agree with his assessment wholeheartedly, is that it's almost like you have to have, maybe two different tracks, but pursue them simultaneously. So one I would suggest is, whether you're with Amazon or any company, it doesn't matter. You want to make yourself indispensable.
Mm,
You want to make sure that whatever the objectives are from your boss's boss, you want to make sure you know them and you nail it. And I know I'm going to have eyes being rolled and saying you're just like a corporate stooge. No, I'm just a realist. That when sometimes if you're in an environment, you got to do what you got to do. Whether you like it or not. So I would say you just want to make yourself that person, that go-to person, so that if there's a layoff, they're going to say, no, we can't lay off Rick. No, he's the guy we have to say. Early in the conversation, we talk about working remote. Now I'm going to be a hypocrite and completely change what I said, so that in a circumstance where you're worried about your job, I would say go into the office 5 days a week if that's an option, because you want to have that proximity bias where you're in the office every day in, day out. They see you in the hallways. You go for lunch, you hang out together, you have those serendipitous, just interactions. So this way, it's harder to let somebody go if you're seeing Rick every day in, day out. He's doing his best. He's doing a great job. You know him. You feel comfortable with him, as opposed to, you see, 30 people in a little box on a Zoom call once a week, once a month, and you don't have any emotional tie to that person. So one thing, definitely, you want to do whatever it takes to make people notice you, not just your boss. You got to get above the boss to make sure they know what you're doing, because the boss is going to probably hog up all the, you got to make sure other people know too, without subtly, just let people know. And make alliances, build your network, so that you won't be that one who's going to get in trouble. The other thing is this: while you're doing that, you want to have a clandestine search going on. You want to get in touch with a couple of recruiters, specifically recruiters who specialize in your space, because if you just get any old recruiter, that's not going to help. You want to have a recruiter that knows your field, understands what you do, knows the players, knows the companies, could easily look at your resume, completely get what you do, so you're not wasting any time. And you don't have to have one. You can get two or three, but just be honest with each one, saying, hey, I'm dealing with other people. They sent my resume here, there, so it's just not awkward. And this way you get them working for you. So they're going to keep your eyes up. But then for yourself, you want to network like crazy. You want to call in every chit you have there. You want to hit up your college alumni, maybe people you grew up with, your family, friends, neighbors, people in your church, temple, mosque, you name it. Anybody to say,
Blind.
hey, I'm sorry, of course. Yeah, that's an obvious one. Yeah, you want to find out. Yeah, and definitely true. You want to go to blind, see kind of what's going on, gauge the
Right.
temperature, who's hiring, who's not hiring. So yeah, you want to make sure that you're out there, that the recruiters are working on your behalf, your networking is keeping an eye on you. So if, let's say, God forbid, you're going to get, let go, it's not like a shock. You're already prepared. You already had some informational interviews. You have recruiters who had some ideas for you. You went on some interviews. The ball is rolling, so it's not a dead stop. The hard part is you get laid off and you just were thinking, oh, everything is fine. And then you hit and you're like, what do I do now? And your head is spinning and
Blindsided. Right.
so you want to do both things. You want to make yourself like where they're not going to let you go. But on the other hand, you want to kind of be active, looking around, building your network, getting known, getting informational interviews and so on. So you ready, the wheels are in motion. So that's kind of a positive thing to do. And I think moving forward, you're always going to have to do that. Like this is not going to be for this time period. I think this is going to be future. Even in good markets, you want to do that.
Right.
You want to, because this way it gives you options to stay where you are and grow, or find a better opportunity, make more money outside.
I mean, if I could add to your advice, I've seen some crazy things in my career. Um, you know, layoffs, corporate restructures, those kind of things, they aren't always driven by performance, but performance actually can help. So I've been at places where some star performers are moved around to a new team suddenly. And what ended up happening was a month later, 2 months later, that person, that star person that moved quote unquote randomly to a new team was saved, and that former team was gutted. So someone, they had a sponsor, they had someone in the leadership, they knew, hey, you know, Rick's in, this business unit that's not doing so well, but I want to keep Rick. Um, it ended up being that they were going to get rid of that business unit. And all of a sudden, 1 or 2 months magically, Rick ends up being moved to, the star business unit or another business unit and is safe. I've certainly seen that happen before. And so, to your point, that proximity bias, right? It certainly helps to have a mentor or a sponsor, right? Even in good times, that proximity bias, you know, can help you find a cool project, right? Maybe, in good times, you get to go to um, the hot, shiny new bat, right? And you get to grow your career and figure out like how much faster you can kind of level up, right? And sometimes that doesn't happen unless you have a sponsor or a mentor, and it doesn't necessarily have to be your manager or in your organization or your direct line, right? I've certainly seen some crazy things. And maybe that's another sign of a layoff, right? Where you start seeing some popular people or some, well known top
That's
performers,
so
or
interesting.
your teammate gets randomly moved to another
That's
team.
so interesting. Like you see like a chessboard, like you're moving these pieces. You're like, I don't understand why you're making that move. That
Yeah.
doesn't seem right. But they know something we don't know.
Yeah.
That's for dude. That's really good advice. I really like that. To kind of find that sponsor, find that mentor who, takes a liking to you, gets you under his or her wing, and this way you can kind of help in these kind of situations. That's a really great piece of advice.
And I think we'll leave it at there.
Yeah. Right, right. So it's
And
not all like right. We can't, this way, not
yeah,
on a negative foot layer, but just
I know.
what you
Yeah,
can
I
do
know.
about it. Right.
Let's not bum people out. Thanks for tuning in on this
Thanks.
new episode of The Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly.
Thanks.